Hey, and welcome back to the Resilience Pod, the podcast helping you become resilient in our world full of disruptions. I'm your host, Rina. Now imagine this, it's 9 a.m. and your CEO is trending, but for the wrong reasons. Systems are down and media is calling like crazy. Your crisis management plans? Well, they're probably in a drawer somewhere. Wait, it's 2025. They're probably on SharePoint, waiting to be signed off or just seen by your crisis manager. What should have been a crisis drill in today's reality is often true. So today's question is, how can we move away from traditional boring, yes, I said it, desktop exercises to something that can help us prepare for our crisis drills to real chaos. Now, to help us answer that question, I can't wait to introduce you to my next guest, the OG of crisis management, multi-award winner extraordinaire, and a friend to the Resilience Pod, author of Crisis Proof. Finally got this in my hands. I'm going to get you to sign it. How to prepare for the worst day of your business life. Jonathan Hemus, welcome to the Resilience Pod.
Thank you, Rina. What a fantastic introduction. I was expecting someone else to walk in, but I'm delighted to be with you.
Oh, thank you. And it's great because, like I said, you're an old friend of the Resilience Pod. How exciting is it that we're here in person in the studio doing this and not on a screen?
Fabulous. It was Zoom last time, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So, right, look, I'm really excited that you're here. You are the OG of crisis management. And so I'm going to draw you with loads of questions. And what I said earlier about to our audience was drills or exercises are becoming quite stale and boring, especially for crisis management. What is the state of that at the moment? So what are most organizations doing wrong? And I feel like we are doing things wrong. So I'm assuming that most organizations are going wrong with their crisis drills. Can you confirm to that? Give us a bit more insights on that.
I mean, I think it really varies.
Yeah.
I've been in this line of business for more than 25 years now. And at the start of that period, I was constantly amazed by the amount of organisations that didn't exercise at all. Sadly, I've stopped being amazed now. There are still a significant proportion of organisations that don't bother.
Yeah.
And that's fine as long as the crisis doesn't happen. But as we've seen, crises do happen.
Yes, they do.
So the worst case is not rehearsing at all, and that still happens. I guess, the second worst thing is the wrong exercise at the wrong time, either dropping a really inexperienced team into a massively complicated and challenging simulation, which does more harm than good usually, or, as you touched on there, a really dry, boring tabletop exercise that no one wants to come to and no one gets very much value out of. There are, however, lots of organisations doing it really well. Okay. So it's not a tale of woe completely.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that after. But the whole just getting through a desktop exercise can become a bit checkboxy. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I've done that. Done the whole tick box thing myself. I'm sure a lot of you have too, so don't lie to me. Can you tell us where we're going wrong with that? Is it a good thing? I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. We love working with clients that really want to make a difference and where we can help them to make a difference. And if that's your commitment as an organization and as a team, then you will want to do an exercise which is much more than a tick box. It's actually about properly building resilience. It's about preventing those bad things from happening. It's not just getting through the exercise and be able to say to the regulator or as part of your governance, we've done the exercise. It's got to be much, much more than that if you really want it to have an impact.
Yeah, definitely. Now, before we unravel a bit and dig a bit deeper into that, just to make things a bit interesting, I've got a bit of a rapid fire for you because there's many myths around crisis management, and I picked some of the top 3 that I've heard. And of course, there's more than 3.
Yeah.
But the first one is only big companies need crisis plans. Myth or not?
Myth.
Yeah. And why?
all organizations need a crisis plan of some kind. It needs to be fit for purpose. It needs to be commensurate with the size of the organization and the risks you face. But smaller organizations are far more likely to go out of business if they botch their crisis response.
Right.
So don't over-engineer it, but have a clear process in place, know who's going to respond, practice, train, rehearse, but at an appropriate level for a small business.
Yeah, okay, great. I love that. Next one, you can figure it out on the day.
Well, it's strange that lots of organisations haven't then, isn't it? It's strange how organisations still get things wrong. I mean, if you were an orchestra, you'd probably rehearse before going on the biggest stage in the world.
I like that.
If you're a football team, you'd probably do some training before the FA Cup final. Why would organisations think that on the most critical day, maybe in the company's history, they'll muddle through, they'll figure it out? They won't.
I love that. Love that. Okay, third one. I wish I'd written down more. You've got a comms plan, or we've got a comms plan. We're fine.
You're not. It's an ongoing challenge to communicate the fact that a crisis communication plan is not a crisis management plan.
Love that.
One of the things I say a lot is successfully managing a crisis is doing the right thing and saying the right thing simultaneously. Communication in a crisis is always critical, but it is not enough. If we take a relatively recent example, my view is that Marks and Spencer have communicated really well about their cyber attack, but they haven't been able to fix the problem very quickly. And so their business and their reputation is still harmed, even though they've communicated brilliantly. So don't mistake a crisis comms plan for a crisis management plan.
Oh gosh, everyone who's got that are going to be, darn it. Okay, just for fun, is there any other myths that you hear a lot in your space of work that people say to you? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, no, you have. I mean, I guess one of the myths would be that we need a playbook approach to our crisis management plans. I am an advocate of a risk agnostic approach to crisis planning. In other words, a really good crisis management process and plan gives you a way of working and acting in a purposeful manner, whatever the crisis is. I'm not arguing against having a set of checklists against some of your key risks. But if your entire plan is based upon A to Z's of what you do against the top 5 risks on your risk register, what happens if it's risk number 6 or risk number 77? All of your careful step-by-step planning doesn't work. So be careful of an approach which is too tightly tied to a playbook.
I love that. I've made a note on that. So look, we're getting free crisis management consultancy here. Really good. That was a bit of fun. Now, I have also another challenge for you, which is not something we do normally on podcasts or see, is something what I call the reverse pitch drill. So a lot of the times, it's a bit of both, isn't it? Like you're going to someone saying, okay, I need this service, trying to convince people, but I want you to kind of think about, I'm your client and you have to convince me that one desktop exercise a year with no budget, no media training is sufficient. Like, can you convince me that there's something better out there or not?
So do you know what, Rina? One of the other things I've learned over 25 years in this business is you can't force people to do things that they don't want to do. And again, being perfectly honest with you, as a consultancy, we would much rather work with organizations who see the benefits, see the value, see the importance. And so forgive me for being so blunt, but I wouldn't want to waste my time trying to convince someone who doesn't want to do something to do it. I would rather work with the willing than those that you have to seek to persuade.
I like that. That's not what I was expecting. I thought you were going to give me this like 60-second pitch to memorize, but I like that.
I mean,
you have to invest.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly explain to the organisation why it would be to their benefit. And what we certainly will do, what I certainly would do is, for example, if you were to say to me, we've got a brand new plan, an inexperienced team, we want to do a mega simulation, I would then be explaining why that maybe wasn't the best idea at that moment in time. Or if you came to me and said, I want you to write our crisis management plan for us, and I want you to do some training, and that's it. I'd be saying that's not enough. You know, you do need to do an exercise. It's only by running an exercise that you will actually know whether you're ready or not.
I love that. You've actually, I'm glad I asked you that question because you've given me a response that I wasn't expecting. I love that. Now, moving on. I want to talk about crisis comparisons to what we see on TV. So I watched the series called Designated Survivor. I don't know if you've seen that. And for those of you watching, have you seen that? Basically, the entire government is wiped out and one person is left, a cabinet member, unprepared to how to deal with chaos and crises. And here in the UK, there's lots of TV shows on this, but there's a show called Bodyguard, something very similar, where there's like a tense moment with security services. They're all scrambling around. It's all chaotic and decisions are being made in split seconds. So picture that in your mind. TV shows make crisis look intense, dramatic, chaotic, but how realistic are these portrayals?
So I would say, as with many TV dramas, whether it's Casualty or whatever it might be, there is an element of truth. There absolutely is. I mean, crises are intense. That's definitely for sure. And actually, I think it's a good thing that there have been a number of programs about crises over the last few years, because it brings that topic to public consciousness and it brings it to business leaders' consciousness. So I think it's a good thing, but there are some very significant differences and also some practices within TV dramas which maybe aren't best practice in the real world.
Yeah. And it's things like, I'm just going to figure it out and wing it and make the decisions and then it's going to be miraculously perfect, like in these shows, which brings me to my next follow-up question is like, do they get them right then? Because they probably don't. And why is that dangerous? Is it dangerous to portray crises like that in these kind of TV shows? I
mean, I think it can be. I think some of the inappropriate behaviours and ways of working that I've seen in crises are, the single hero who is fighting the crisis. In my experience, good crisis management is about teamwork and bringing together a really good blend of different personality types, different skills, not the stereotypical action hero alpha male who comes in and fixes it through their own brilliance.
With no rehearsal.
With no rehearsal.
Yeah.
And I also think sometimes we see a lot of action maybe without thinking. We see in these programs people reacting to events. There's analysis within a crisis, there's thinking within a crisis, there's planning ahead. Now, that doesn't make for dramatic TV, but it does make for good crisis management.
Love that. Yeah, really insightful. It does make it sound exciting though, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
However, it's almost unrealistic to think that you can just wing it as well. So
definitely.
I'd be interested to see what people who are listening or watching us have experienced in their own businesses. Like, do execs suddenly think, we're going to have this designated survivor bodyguard type of situation in hand, that kind of thing. Okay, interesting. Moving on from that, could you give us an example of what a good crisis exercise looks like and a bad one that you've seen in your 25 years?
I'll give you a couple of examples from the last, one very recent and one from a couple of years ago. So for a particular client, we actually worked alongside another provider, a big organization who were running a desktop exercise for that client. We were delivering other services, and it was for their senior team. And the approach to the desktop exercise was a PowerPoint presentation with minimal background research and with minimal direction, purpose, or structure. Now, in a way, that should have been kind of good news for us, because it showed one of our competitors in a not very good light, and it's not how we would do things. But actually, the downside of that was, for quite a while, it turned off that leadership team for exercising at all, because they felt that's what exercising was. And it was dry, and it wasn't very high quality, and it wasn't very relevant. So for me, broadly, exercises need to be fit for purpose. They need to be thoughtful. They need to be robust. They need to be thought through in great detail. Contrast that with, and I can mention the client because they are on our website, Virgin Atlantic. We did an exercise with them recently, which involved around about 100 people being exercised within gold, silver, and bronze. And the client wanted it to be as realistic as possible. And it was about a plane crash. But they, said, we want our family support advisors involved. We want our PR agency involved with this. We want all of the partners who would be part of a real response to be involved. But the thing that one of the C-suite loved was when he had to phone up to speak to the fire chief in the States, because that was where the crisis was supposed to have happened. He actually was speaking to a real fire chief. And so it made it so authentic for him. And what that means is the team fully engages, fully immerses themselves in the exercise. And of course, they get, best value out of it. And coincidentally, this exercise took place shortly before the substation incident at Heathrow. Virgin's CEO was part of the crisis response. And I know that the organisation found that they performed really well as a result of the rehearsal. So the first one is not fit for purpose. The second one, because that organisation needs to be really, really well, really well rehearsed. And forgive the pun, it landed really well.
Brilliant. Yeah, and you can see from the good and the bad that this Virgin Atlantic good one, it has lots of people involved, different stakeholders, participants, external, internal, whereas the boring one, which is what I was saying at the beginning, it's almost easy way out, isn't it? But you're not going to get any buy-in from that. So that is really good examples, and is a nice segue into my next question to elevate that position. Then we can't have this conversation and not talk about AI because we know it's everywhere. So can AI help us with our crisis drills, exercises?
Of course it can. As you've said, AI clearly is revolutionizing everything. So it'd be incredible for it not to play a role within exercising. I think it's particularly helpful in terms of content generation. I think it can be very helpful in terms of brainstorming when you're looking to find a new angle or a new scenario, getting AI to have a think about it as well as the team. Another area it can be really useful in is actually within the exercise itself, when maybe the team does something unexpected and you need to pivot quite quickly to react to whatever that organisation may have done, to have AI at your side to maybe give you some perspective on okay, well, what does this mean? The fact that the client has turned left rather than turning right, what might be the implications of that? And there are many other potential applications of AI as well.
It makes things a bit more interesting, doesn't it, if it's done right? And there's like these whole considerations for ethics and stuff like that, but we won't go too much into that. But we could use AI to, like you said, give us a different perspective, like simulate different social media posts if we're doing like media training and stuff. How much should we automate and how much should we leave to professionals?
So again, I think like most areas, AI has a really valuable role to play, but it is not going to replace human beings. I mean, as a consultancy, one of the things that really underpins our success is relationship building. So as a consultancy, it is the people on the client side and on the consultancy side and the relationships they build. Equally, on the client side, when you are in a crisis, ultimately, it is still going to be a group of people working together as a team, supported and maybe informed by AI, but that team still needs to operate purposefully, effectively and cohesively and make the big decisions. You can't outsource that to a machine.
And the machine won't even pick that up.
Correct.
So it's very much black and white, isn't it? Yeah. It's as good as what you put into it, which is interesting. Could do a whole podcast on that. So that's quite insightful, because it brings me on to like AI is here to stay. The future of doing these type of simulations, they're here to stay. What is your view on that? Is it going to get even more intense, better? Should we be utilizing AI to stress test our responses? Stay away from it, use it hand in hand?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it is a tool, and as we know, it's an evolving tool. So I'm sure there are going to be all sorts of interesting ways that we can use AI now, but also in future. It's only going to get richer and more capable. I guess the other thing we need to look at when developing exercises is the other side of the coin, because of course AI provides a risk. So, rehearsing for misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, I think is going to be a critical part of rehearsing your crisis response. I was looking last week at the new Google capability. By the time this goes out, it'll probably be the old Google capability whereby you can produce incredibly realistic video content without any of those events ever having happened. So I think getting our arms around how we're going to prepare and respond to AI-generated crises is just as important as figuring out how to apply it within our services.
Yeah. I love that you touched on the misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes and stuff. We have a whole episode on that dedicated to that, but it is so prevalent in everything that we do. Yeah. It's just there, but it is a massive risk. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, because it's at wouldn't expect any less, Jonathan. Really interesting to dig deeper into that. Now, audience, I'd invite your thoughts on this. If you've got any views, do they match Jonathan's? Do they contradict them? What do you have to say about this topic? Let me know in the comments or reach out to me. Now, moving on, Jonathan, I've got a few more questions, but I really felt like I could have done like 60 pages of questions to ask you. I want to do something called a drill makeover challenge. So it's basically looking at 3 different organizations, type of businesses, and how can they do their crisis management exercises, drills. So what would be the difference between a financial firm, a tech startup, and a public utility? Is there any difference in how you would approach doing crisis drills? So
I think the first thing I would say is sector, of course, does make some difference, and the size and history of the organization makes some difference. But it's about far more than sectors or types of organization. It is about, the level of preparedness already. It is about understanding the culture and values of the organization. So in the real world, I would be looking to very much understand and ask questions of each of those three organizations before suggesting how to respond. But in the absence of that, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
So in order to keep things fresh for the financial services organization, I would be willing to bet a fairly sizable sum of money that they have done countless cyber exercises over the last 3 to 5 years. And that's important. I mean, it clearly is a critical risk. But there's a real danger, I think, of organizations, maybe particularly in the financial services sector, thinking that cyber risks are the only risks in town.
So true.
So I would be thinking about doing, for example, a reputational risk. Look at, the problems that NatWest had, 12, 18 months ago through the furore about Nigel Farage's bank account. That was nothing to do with cyber. It was nothing to do with its operations. It was to do with whether people felt that its behaviour was appropriate, acceptable, and had they told the truth about it. Look at OD asset management, inappropriate behaviour by the founder of the organisation. Those allegations brought the organisation to its knees. So I would be thinking about not just doing cyber, but for example, looking at something more reputational, more behavioural, more ethical.
I love that you say that, because we always do focus on, like what you're saying in the previous questions about don't focus on, make it risk agnostic, don't focus on the top ones where obviously cyber would be top for most people, and that's what they're focused on. I love that, because we definitely often forget to do the reputational, more ethical kind of.
I mean, do focus on cyber, but don't fixate on cyber, I think I would say. I like
that. Yeah, don't fixate. I'm writing it down. Don't fixate. So everybody who's watching by now knows that I'm just taking a million notes for everything you're saying, even though we've got it on recording, because it's just nice. I'm a serial note taker. So okay. What about a tech startup?
So tech startup, again, the approach needs to be fit for purpose. By fit for purpose, it probably means, they haven't got hundreds of thousands of pounds to spend on this. It probably means they're very entrepreneurial. So for them, what I would be looking at, first of all, is their culture, and they're probably go-getting and, pretty sharp guys and girls. So I would be looking to do a relatively short exercise, and probably even multiple mini scenarios within a short period of time to, and again, I'm stereotyping, but to keep that kind of high energy leadership team really engaged. The one thing I would be doing though is making sure that they do have a crisis management plan or process. Entrepreneurial organizations are at greater risk of kind of winging it or thinking they can muddle their way through. But I would make that process really simple, the bare minimum to give them that level of structure that enables them to succeed.
I love that, because it's so true. You forget about those things, don't you? Because you're so busy, ramped up being this entrepreneur. That's massive stereotype, but probably true. Love that. What about a public utility, a public company? So clearly, the impact of a public utility having a major crisis is huge. The number of stakeholders involved and the impact would be enormous. Therefore, typically, I would be looking to run a really fairly complex, in-depth and significant crisis type for their exercise. And a bit like I mentioned for Virgin Atlantic earlier, I would want them to involve some of their key stakeholders and advisors, because when you're a public utility, government, regulators, customers, watchdogs, the media, of course, suppliers, business partners, there are a whole load of stakeholders that need to fit into your crisis response. It's not just you. So I can think of one of our clients, for example, that is kind of a public utility.
And for the big exercises, they involve the relevant government departments. They involve their key business partners, their biggest subcontractors, because it's all right you knowing what you need to do and having a brilliant process. But if your key partners and stakeholders don't know and don't fit into that,
absolutely,
it's still going to founder.
So true. I think that part is what, regardless of what industry you're in and what type of business, is something we don't do as often. It's done very piecemeal, unless your crisis management capabilities are quite mature. Would you suggest doing kind of these partnership exercises before your own house is in order? So, because a lot of the time we try to run before we can walk with our crisis like maturity and program. What's your take on that?
No, I would get your own house in order first. I mean, I do think, like everything, this is an incremental process of improvement and capability building. So absolutely get your own team well drilled, confident and capable, then flex your muscles a bit more, extend the scope by bringing in those business partners. But no, mixing my metaphors, you don't want to wash your dirty linen in public too early on. Yeah,
quite right. It's one of those things that, as a professional working in this industry, as well as doing this podcast and like talking to others, there's always that business view from higher up that we need to do these drills with third parties, but we're not actually that probably not as competent inside. So I feel like that's a general challenge that most people have. So correct me if I'm wrong, if you're listening or watching, do you have that challenge? Because I've definitely had that challenge. So it's interesting that you've kind of said, keep your
but I think it's a balancing act as well. There's also a danger of being fearful of it for too long. So there comes a moment at which we do need to do that. And again, this kind of comes back to the point that exercising is not about proving that you're perfect. It is about building capability and confidence. But of course, it's also about identifying what could still be improved or enhanced. And in order to find that out, you need to get some things wrong and then address them.
Yeah, quite right. That's the exciting thing, isn't it?
It is exciting,
well, we find it exciting, probably not for those who are exercising. But hey, okay, really insightful. I like that whole drill makeover challenge. A few more questions for you. Now, budget is such a huge thing because not a lot of organizations have copious amounts of money to do this, even if they would wish. So how can we do crisis on a shoestring type of thing? So in terms of hacks for budget, what is essential the most essential thing we need to have?
I mean, I would say in simple terms, any organization of any size that wants to have a minimum level of preparedness needs a plan or process which is written down.
Yeah.
It needs to have a group of people who have been briefed on that plan or process and understand what their roles and responsibilities would be. And they need to have rehearsed that response. And it can be a lo-fi rehearsal. But until you have those three elements in place, you are not ready. However big or small you are, you need a clear and effective way of working. You need a group of people who understand what they would be required to do, and you need to practice it.
That doesn't seem like a lot, does it?
No.
It's quite the bare minimum there, which you would expect. And it doesn't have to be all this like fancy stuff.
Correct.
AI and things like that. What can you skip?
Of those three things, I don't think you can skip any of them. Okay. And frankly, if, for example, you feel you can only afford, whether it's time or money, to do a plan, you almost might as well not bother, because you might have a perfect plan, but if it's only, revealed on the day of the crisis, it's not going to work. No one's going to look at it. No one's going to understand it. No one's going to listen to you waving in the corner saying, we've got a plan, we've got a plan. They have to know about it and they need to have practiced it. So
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think you need all three.
Yeah, I like that because it's not a TV show like we mentioned in the other segment. It's we're no designated survivor here.
Exactly.
It's most of the time you're not going to be able to wing it into something positive. Last question on that. What is the best possible outcome for small budgets in doing crisis on the shoestring?
So I think the best possible outcome is doing what we've just talked about, and therefore having that inner confidence that if the worst were to happen, we would be able to respond effectively. I mean, it can be really quite rudimentary. If we're talking, about a team of an organisation which is maybe 10 people strong, it's a really simple plan and process. Yeah. It can be, a 2-hour, 90-minute briefing during a senior leadership team meeting, and it can be an annual walkthrough with the broader team involved as well. It can be something you can create yourselves, but what it gives is that confidence that you are able to respond. And by the way, also, even for smaller organizations, if you're supplying services or products to larger organizations, one of the areas of procurement which is becoming much more common is proof that you do have a plan and that you have rehearsed it. So true. Yeah.
Do the minimum, guys. Yeah, I don't think you can do things on a budget really well either. You have to have some form of investment, be it one person doing that or leading on that. Yeah, really like that. Is true. We're coming to a close almost, but a few more fun things to keep you on your toes. This is about my next question to you is about how can we learn from others' mistake. So is there ethically, what can we do that others have done wrong? What can we avoid that others have done wrong? And then enhance our crisis approach without seeming like a copycat.
Mm-hmm. So this is all about, I would suggest, creating and living a crisis-resistant culture. This is about not saying, oh, look at my competitor, something bad has happened to them. Oh, that's good news for us. It's actually about saying something bad has happened to one of our competitors. Mm-hmm. What would we do? Yeah. If it's happened to them, it can happen to us. So sitting down as a leadership team, considering if this were to happen to us, how would we respond? What can we do now to reduce the chances of something similar happening to us? And what do we need to do to prepare for it, to have contingencies in place? And frequently within industries, there are actually opportunities to sit down and have a discussion. If I go back to, the aviation sector, in crisis, and even just the general topic of crisis, it's probably the one area where competitors will set that competitive tension to one side and say, we all want to be ready for the worst, or ideally to prevent it from happening. So let's share our learnings. So I think often, your peers within the sector will be open to that kind of learning. But going back to the crisis-resistant culture, one of the signifiers of an organisation which really wants to be crisis-resistant is a real commitment to learning from your own incidents and near misses, but also from your peers. It sounds awful to say this, but it's almost a unique opportunity to think about how this could happen, how it could affect us, and making the most of that opportunity to learn and become more resilient.
Yeah, insightful, isn't it? I like that. I wonder if a lot of people do that though in their crisis management teams. Do you see that?
I mean, some do, and I'll tell you the other trap that organisations fall into. It's identifying learnings, but they're not acting on them. So they've identified what the learnings are, but that's only stage one. Stage two is acting on those learnings. And I think particularly when you have had a crisis or an incident, and because it's, hugely draining and it's not a pleasant experience, there's a real tendency to want to say, phew, I'm glad that's over. Let's get back to business as usual. But you owe it to yourselves and you owe it to the people who've been affected by your crisis not to do that, to within a reasonably short time frame, no more than a month after the crisis has been closed, to sit down, identify what happened, why it happened, what did we learn, what do we need to do differently, and then act on it.
Yeah, I definitely taken that away, because I think you all should too. I feel we don't do that enough.
Yeah.
We don't have the time to do that because everyone's so busy doing everything else. So really insightful. I like that. And you'll be glad to know we're coming to a close of that.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. It's like giving you your live interview here. What are what 3 key takeaways that you want to share with everyone who's listening or watching us today?
So if I focus specifically on exercising, I guess the first key takeaway would be to understand why you are doing the exercise, what success looks like and what your objectives are, because that will then enable you to develop and execute the right kind of exercise, the right content that's actually going to move you forward in your resilience journey. So challenge yourself to really understand, what is it I'm seeking to achieve here? The second key takeaway would be do exercises and do them regularly.
Yes.
And the other part of that second one is get the right people in the room. If, for example, every level of the organization exercises apart from the C-suite, then there is a danger of the C-suite sweeping all your good work aside by operating in a different way when the crisis happens. So second thing would be get the right people in the room. Easier said than done. I understand that sometimes.
But it's I feel that that's a really important takeaway. Often it's always the simplest things that we kind of dismiss. So I really like that.
And the third one is, without an exercising program, a regular exercising program, you are not prepared for crisis.
Okay.
And your response to a crisis will be worse than if you had invested time and money in exercising. It's definitive.
Just facts.
In my view, it's facts.
Mic drop.
And experience.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
This is so insightful. Now, as I wrap up, we ask everyone who comes on in the new studio to answer a wildcard question, and you will have your chance to give somebody, our next guest, and Jonathan doesn't know who the next guest is, ask your wildcard question. So I'm going to open up the Resilient by Design guest handbook, and the wildcard question we got from our previous guest was, what are your goals? So that could be for the rest of this year or beyond. It's up to you to decide how you interpret that.
Right. So this is this is probably beyond goals. I want to talk about why I do what I do, because that's my goal.
Okay.
The reason I do what I do is because over the years, I've seen far too many organizations do and say the wrong things in crisis and harm not just their business, their reputation, their finances, but also cause lots of other people to be harmed, whether it's their employees who've lost their jobs, whether it's people caught up in a crisis who've been injured, or worse, whether it's investors who've lost money, whether it's customers who've lost access to a key service. So my goal is to make a difference to that. My goal is to make more organizations ready to do and say the right things and end what is really the needless harm, not just to them, but also to their stakeholders. So that's a very, very big goal. It's more of a purpose than a goal, but it's what keeps me passionate about this job, interested and excited, making a difference, helping organizations not to cause that needless harm.
I love that. And guys who are watching, I promise he didn't rehearse that and he didn't know the wildcard question, because that almost is so perfect. And I love that because it actually aligns with everything you're doing, everything this book is about, which we were going to get him to sign. So thank you so much for that. I will now pass over the guest handbook for you to think of your next question. Now, you can't tell me, or I will read it, but you can't tell the audience what you're writing. So if you write the date, your name and your question, and we will reveal who that is in the next episode. So you'll have to, Jonathan, also tune in to see who answers your question next time. So I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah.
And while Jonathan writes down his question for our next guest, I'll wrap up to say a very big thank you to Jonathan for coming on the pod in person this time. And guys, if you liked this episode, well, by now you should definitely know what to do. So that's me, your host, Rina Singh, signing out. Until next time, keep on investing in your resilience.